The central element in this painting is that large-scale piggy bank of terracotta. I bought it in London at a very famous antiquities dealer on one of the first trips I made there. It's a piggy bank. It's from Java. They're the ones who invented the piggy bank. The monkey figure is from Mexico. It's pre-Columbian, but there are many different cultures over the centuries in Mexico, pre-Columbian Mexico. And I've always been fascinated with this series of civilizations, which seem to have been so advanced. What's left of the civilizations are the fragments of architecture and some actual pyramids that are the size of the pyramids in Egypt and contemporary with the Egyptian pyramids. It's very mysterious. There was a series of cultures that developed in different parts, and many of them simply carried on the tradition of previous cultures in their artworks. And this monkey is from one of those. I couldn't say which, with the Han Dynasty horse. The background is now added. There's a series of glass shelves, a shelving unit that they sit on, and that becomes part of the painting. Godzilla developing. Here's the final setup. The arrangement of toys that I brought from the studio in New York to my studio in New Jersey. It's a view from our dock, early springtime. At the studio in New York. Meanwhile, I'm completing this one with Godzilla. I've added the background. Setup. The object in the middle is a boater, a man rowing a boat. The boat rocks on top of the two upright little posts, and when you hit it, you have to push it, and it wiggles back and forth, and the man rows the boat. It was a birthday present from one of the sons of my dealer, Betty Cunningham. I can't remember which birthday it was. The Mickey Mouse candy dispenser was something I picked up at a flea market. The setup of the arrangement that was set up in my studio with a couple weather vanes, one representing the American Indian, the other George Washington. There are two sailboats, one's in the background, which is a large sailboat from the Mediterranean area. I don't know exactly where. And with the foreground carving and the carving on the wall were from a New Guinea tribe. And I was told that vertical carving with the hooks were meant to hang shrunken heads. This was a head hunting tribe, or that's the story. And one of the sons of Rockefeller family sent back a huge collection of works like that, very large in scale, some of them, a full story high, from the same area before he was killed by the natives and cannibalized. And the whimsical figure, fanciful figure in the corner was a gift from my son. It was a souvenir from Mexico. It's my son's trip to Mexico. It's in pieces. You put them together, you assemble it in any way you want. And the clown on the scooter I bought from my friend. All this was many years ago. Springtime is coming rapidly. Model sailboat. Incidentally, the head from the guinea is resting on an old but standard shoe shine stool, which had been painted red. Usually they were just black. I haven't decided yet what to put in that final lower right-hand corner of the page. I decided at the end to add a third element of this to also have a shield, S-H-I-E-L-D, carved by the same group. Here you see it developing on the right edge, and the shoe shine stool has been embellished. I kept going back and adding, so now the folds and the sails have been added. The view of the house at the lake, and suddenly the blossoms on these bushes were in bloom. This was interesting. I knew most people wouldn't understand what this was about, but I decided to paint it anyway. Meanwhile, this painting develops. And then I'm starting a new one. It represents a beautiful woman's head, and on top is a beautiful woman's full figure, but also two other heads of beautiful women. And each of those heads has a dove sitting on top of it. What's missing is a strap handle from the top of the upper figure's head to the back of the big figure's head lower down. I know that because there are at least 6 identical versions of this figure in the Naples Archaeological Museum in Italy. And it was done at a Greek workshop in Italy, Greek colony workshop in Italy, near Naples. This is a new setup. Back in the lake house front in New Jersey, I was walking through a nearby flea market, and over the years I've become very friendly with the owner of the flea market, the man who ran it. And at the end of my Sunday visit one day, he handed me that old model of one of Columbus's 3 ships. I don't know which one it represents. I think Santa Maria was one of them. It was so banged up and the sails were in such bad shape that nobody bought it. So he handed it to me as a gift. So I decided to use it in this painting. And I put an old model airplane in front and another toy of this kind of circus, I guess, riding the blue horse. The blue horse gets up on its hind legs, and the man on the horse has attached to the top of his head a little rod that holds a yellow beam across it, from which are suspended a couple of dangling abstract shapes. They spin around his head. When the horse gets up on its hind legs, he no longer works. The same thing happened with the elephant, the pink elephant in the background. He used to do a little spin around, a little circle, and then he would get up on his front legs, and the rear end would go up, and then he'd come down. This is a new setup. I decided that this view out the window of my fire escape door was interesting. It has these new glass skyscrapers. And so I concentrated on those first. Pre-Columbian plate. I don't know exactly which pre-Columbian colony produced it in Mexico. These different groups worked in different centuries, but they tended to echo one another. Colima, Jalisco, even later Aztec, repeat some forms, and so on. This is the view from my window overlooking West 36th Street towards Hudson Yards buildings. I used to be able to see the sky. The sky has disappeared behind the buildings. The buildings block the view of the sky. On 9th Avenue, you see the parking lot and the elevator parking lot where they usually put my car because they didn't use it much during the week. Buildings at Hudson Yard, which have gone up in the past few years, has totally eliminated the joy I got from watching sunsets. I've decided to do a watercolor of this. This setup includes some of the earlier things I had collected over the years. In the background is a vase from the ancient city of Petra, which I have just read a book about. Petra was a city that nobody who was not Arabic was allowed in the 18th and 19th centuries. It just has one entry and exit through a canyon wall. It's about 75 or 100 feet deep, and it literally is a wall, and you enter the town through a tunnel in the wall, a natural crevice opening through which the tourists today ride donkeys. I did ride the donkey, as did everyone. My only experience of riding a donkey. Anyway, as you get through this crevice in the rock, the first thing you see is what is referred to as the bank. That is a savings bank. It's a carving in a wall behind which is a cave, which was refined into a very large room. But the top of the carving on the cliff in which it's carved is a frieze that's exactly reproduced here at the top of this vase. Can't say for certain that this was produced in Petra, but it certainly looks like it. In front of it is standing an Athenian caryatid, like the ones holding up the roof of the porch on a little building next to the Parthenon on the Acropolis in Athens. And in front of that, the large figure of baby Bacchus, because he's sitting on the wineskin, is Italian Renaissance. And in the foreground on the right is about half of the lid of a vase by the very famous Amasis painter, authenticated by the man who was then the head of the Antiquities department at the Metropolitan Museum, who wanted it for the museum, wanted me to gift it to the museum. I said, I'll leave it to you when I die. The sphinxes and the siren in the middle are finely painted. On the left side is one of the very early pieces I bought, which was a figure of an ape or a monkey from Egypt. Very realistic and precise. Now I see these buildings of, they put up a still frame. It takes a couple years, and then they cover it with this reflective glass. my second painting using Godzilla as the dominant image. At this time, I decided to emphasize the Mickey Mouse candy dispenser. It's entirely of plastic and semi-transparent. Years ago, I used it in a painting from a skyscraper room, a view of New York over the city, over the tunnel, the Midtown Tunnel, exit and entrance. And he was in the corner of the window. When the painting was finished, he fell 12 stories and broke apart. And I scotch taped him together. So he's painted now in his repaired condition. Missing a nose, but I pasted a black button I had to replace the original nose. I wanted to do a painting of the contrast between the old tenement buildings across the street from me, with the sky being obliterated by these new buildings, old and new. And I'm doing a double-sized watercolor of it. And what gave me the most trouble was the movement. On a sunny day, the sun slowly goes from east to west. And by the time it hits midway, right over that center building, it begins to blind me. And the color changes, the sky changes, and all that. And so usually I try to, on this one, work on primarily days that were cloudy. I decided to move to the front window a figure of Mercury. It's from the 1890s or something like that, from the Boston Post Office. I think it's the 1880s. All that's carved on that round ball that Mercury is standing on, it says 80, so I assume it was 1880. It's from the Boston Post Office, and I got it at an Antiquities show in New York before 1970. And I placed him there into the scene. And this is the start of the watercolor. After the first few days, it took one day just to draw the window frame. And then I started with the buildings. As of now, I've more or less completed a tour of the west side of my studio and live in an apartment in the front on West 36th Street. I now have to start concentrating on the left side of the studio, where there's another cluster of objects.